Now, up first, we've got to talk about the most out-of-touch moment from mainstream media I've seen in some time, and that's saying something. It came during an interview on MSNBC on Meet the Press with Kristen Welker, where she was interviewing Senator John Fetterman, the Democrat from Pennsylvania, and asked him about something Kamala Harris recently said, which is the context you need to know to understand this exchange and see just how bizarre it truly was. So here's that recent clip from Kamala Harris that Kristen Welker is going to reference.
I'm a gun owner. Tim Walz is a gun.
I did not know that.
If somebody breaks in my house, they're getting shot.
Yes, I hear that. I hear that.
Probably should not have said that.
But
my staff will deal with that later.
Yeah.
Now, with this context in mind, let's take a look at the really strange question this MSNBC journalist chose to ask the senator from Pennsylvania.
I want to ask you about something that Vice President Kamala Harris said this week. She was talking about gun ownership with Oprah Winfrey. She said, quote, "If somebody breaks into my house, they're going to get shot." You, Senator, are a gun owner. As the leader of a party that prides itself on advocating for gun safety, was it responsible for Vice President Harris to make those comments?
Absolutely. I think the vast majority of Americans, if you had somebody breaking into your house that might be there to harm you, you probably have the right to shoot them. And I think that's a vast majority of Americans would agree with that.
Y'all, I don't know if I've ever seen one clip that so perfectly encapsulates just how incredibly out of touch the media class can be with the American people. Kamala Harris said nothing wrong. Any American, or at least 95%, Republicans, Democrats, conservatives, liberals, progressives, whatever, any normal American would agree that if somebody breaks into your home in the middle of the night and is potentially going to rob you or hurt your family, you have every right to shoot them. And you're not doing anything wrong. You're not doing anything unsafe or dangerous. They were doing something unsafe and dangerous by messing with the wrong person, breaking into the wrong house tonight. I mean, look, I don't agree with Kamala Harris on much, but that's perhaps the only relatable thing I've ever heard her say. I would co-sign that 100%. Break into my house, something similar might just happen to you. So it was really bizarre to see this MSNBC journalist present this completely milquetoast and uncontroversial statement from Kamala Harris, and yet somehow find it like radical or off-putting or irresponsible. Babe, no. You're the one that's out of touch, and you desperately need to touch grass and maybe step outside the MSNBC studios for once and go talk to the American people, because you clearly are very out of step with their day-to-day life. And that's the real problem here. It's not just this one journalist or this one clip. It's that the media class, or the class of people that staffs up the cable news agencies and the major newspapers like the Washington Post or the New York Times, is, well, for all the left's talk about the importance of representation and diversity, remarkably unrepresentative and undiverse in the ways that matter most, the actual differences in values and backgrounds and experiences. They have a lot of people who check off different boxes on the census, so there's a lot of superficial diversity in these institutions, but not a lot of actual diversity in the types of people and whether they go to church, whether they own a gun, whether they're pro-life or pro-choice, whether they grew up in a rural part of the country, a red state outside of a major city, whether they went to college or not. All these things, you tend to have a very specific type of person who becomes a journalist, who works for MSNBC or CNN or Washington Post or what have you. And it tends to be a well-educated, elite person who went to a fancy school, who does not own a gun, who is pro-choice, who is not religious. And that's fine. There's a place for people like that in journalism, of course. There's nothing wrong inherently with being those things and wanting to be a reporter, because we all have different biases and backgrounds we bring to the table. The problem is when you are only composed, or at least mostly composed of people with that kind of background, and then you have to cover a country that's actually very different from that hive mind, from that echo chamber you've created in your newsroom. Well, when you have that dichotomy, you end up with situations like this, where journalists express incredulity or otherwise share sentiments as if something is odd or bizarre when it's actually incredibly normal, and extremely relatable to the public because they exist in an echo chamber, because there's not true diversity in the media ecosystem, and they're unable to cover things fairly and accurately and be in touch with the public they're supposed to serve as a result. That's why this clip stood out to me, not because in and of itself it was a particularly important exchange, but just because it was a perfect microcosm of everything that's wrong with mainstream media and why trust in the media continues to crater and plummet among the public. But what do you think? Were you even surprised to see this, or is this just basically par for the course at this point? Let me know in the comments below.